Hello, Driving.ca. This is the Mercedes-Benz S580e, the S-Class plug-in hybrid. This black-on-black executive sedan is Mercedes-Benz technological flagship and a preview of what is to come for the future of the brand. It can be easy to forget, but the Mercedes-Benz S-Class has been with us for generations. So often finished black on black, these lengthy executive sedans have been shuttling around your favorite dignitaries and dictators for the last 60-odd years. And today, it exists a world apart from those origins. No longer are we playing with the V12 grandeur of the 1990s, or even the V8s of more recent years. No, things have gotten sensible. This thing is a plug-in hybrid, and it works that really well. And yet, it's circled back in other ways. This car here is powered by a 3-liter straight 6. That's really rather traditional. But, of course, it's now running plug-in hybrid technology. This S580e claims 90 kilometers of all-electric range, a number which it may or may not get to, but we'll get to that. What matters, though, is that this powertrain now puts out a combined 510 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. Better still, in proper modern S-Class fashion, it does so on a delightful air suspension system. So then, what does the Mercedes S580 mean to the driver, to the passenger, and to the Mercedes market at large? Today we'll explore all of this, how the S-Class drives, rides, why it does what it does, how efficient it is now, and also what compromises it seems to have made to keep competitive in today's marketplace. Before we try to answer any of these questions, though, it really bears asking who you are and what you're trying to get out of a car like this. You see, the S-Class is really a vehicle that's built for two very different sorts of buyers. Whereas most vehicles prioritize the driver in most every consideration, the S-Class is meant for either the front left corner or the rear right. You can drive this on your own every day. It is an entirely pleasant commuter, I can tell you. That said, it's also something that you can buy and then hire someone else to drive you about in. For the more independent sort, who can drive themselves to and from the law office on their own, the S-Class is a very steady, smooth, easygoing drive. More than that, it's quite a fascinating drive as well. As Mercedes' traditional technological testbed, the S-Class deploys the latest and greatest in most everything Mercedes-Benz. The flavor of the era now is advanced driver assistance systems. And oh boy, does this thing come absolutely packed. We are talking active steering assistance, active lane keeping assistance, a lane change assistant that will let you tip the signal one way or the other, and the car will just take care of the change for you. You get braking assistance with cross-traffic awareness. This isn't just an emergency setup either. This is just as I approach other traffic with the ebb and flow, it will actually pull back a little bit. Toyota has also actually started deploying this in their latest Toyota Safety Sense setups. It's really smooth in those, but it's even more graceful and unintrusive here. It helps a lot. It simplifies your drive, but without ever feeling like it's holding your hand in any particularly annoying way. We've got active blind spot intervention as well. That means we get those little indicators in the mirrors, but it also means that the steering will actually fight back a little to keep you from pulling into someone if you don't shoulder check. You've got traffic sign awareness, which not only uses the car's many cameras to read the traffic signs and present them in the cluster, but can also dynamically adjust your speed, whether in cruise control or just driving normally. And then, finally, we get to the usual emergency brake collision mitigation setup. That part, honestly, old hat, feels boring compared to the rest. All of this makes the S-Class a really curious thing to drive. Not even because of the dynamics, but just because there is so much technology at play and that it's so impressively integrated. Cruising down the highway, you still have to have eyes forward, hands on the steering wheel. And Mercedes is actually doing this so smoothly now that they have actually bucked Hyundai Genesis from my top spot highway driver assistance preference. Then of course you get the regular stuff, the ways that the S-Class responds to controls and inputs. Built and marketed as it is as effectively a personal limousine, this thing is built for comfort, and that includes not jarring the passengers. Pedal inputs are very smooth and steady. The accelerator picks it up, and if you roll into it, will actually pull. but it's never going to be snappy like you might be used to in even just your regular crossovers. Everything has a nicely damped curve to it. It rolls into the power. Likewise, braking is really steady. This is partly thanks to the fact that it is now electronic. This is brake-by-wire. Underfoot, the pedal still feels just as you'll be used to in most anything else. But it's now factored in software to similarly steady and filter out any jerky inputs that you or perhaps your crass young chauffeur may be feeding it. Nicely too, it has a friendly brake hold feature, rather like Porsche and Audi do. To use that, all you have to do is push the brake pedal all the way in when you're at a stop, and it'll hold. And especially novel here is the fact that with that electronic system, it actually holds the pedal all the way back there. Mercedes has clearly gone to a lot of effort to make sure that this feels right, and that everything behaves and places itself where it's really meant to be. Then we get to the steering, which is of course electric and really pleasantly weighted here. What's also nice is that with this smooth outer ring around it, you can just let it slide in your hands to unwind and fall straight. Much like those other highlights, it really smooths and steadies the way the car returns to center and straightens out when you're exiting a corner. It's just nice. For the buyer who's going to be driving themselves too, you get even more goodies depending on how you equip it. This car has the $7,000 premium pack, and one of the highlights that I'm really enjoying in it is its adaptive bolstering. You get all the normal luxury stuff like massagers, which are really nice in this one, and of course all your temperature controls, ventilation, and heating. That's all cool, that's all normal. What's more novel though are these side bolsters. They actually inflate and deflate dynamically depending not on steering angle itself, but on actual G-force. Whereas other cars, like some of the earlier M's and AMGs, would just stick it out as soon as you turn the wheel, here it just gives you what you need, just based on how the car is pitching or yawing. It's really neat. It keeps you upright without you actually having to employ any core strength. It's also just fun. I like wobbling it back and forth because it catches me. Like, look at this. What's going on? This is not a sport bucket, and yet I'm so securely positioned. It's fabulous. It seems a shame too, because passengers in the back there don't get to enjoy that. The S-Class is a little weird in this regard because it's always been something that is meant for chauffeuring people. This is something, whether you're a dignitary or you're just someone who's getting a really posh ride home from the airport, you should be riding in the greatest comfort back there. And to be sure, you can ride in pretty significant comfort back there. Depending on your preferences, you can spec a $6,600 premium rear seat pack. That gets seat memory for the back. That gets massagers for the back. That gets you more climate and comfort stuff for the back. It also gets you those shades that go up on the side and rear windows. Privacy, shade, it's all wonderful. If you want to experience the proper executive treatment though, you've got to spend another $4,700 on top of those $6,600. That gets you the executive rear upgrade for that position. That means that in addition to all the other seat upgrades, you get a little leg rest, a little ottoman sort of thing, like you'd see in the BMW i7s or in the Genesis G90. In this case though, it also then gets a calf massager, because that's what I've been missing in my luxury sedans. It also brightens things up with something of an airline style experience. You get a fixed center console like those pods that you're used to in business class. You get folding tray tables as well. It's just the height of comfort, or at least the height shy of the Maybach models. Tragically, excruciatingly, however, it doesn't get these nifty bolsters. It sucks to suck, rear passengers. Learn to drive yourself. Now, once you get over the seating, the massagers, the different available tiers of interior mood lighting, which can be dynamic and multicolored, it's quite fun. Then we get to the other core of this new cabin, because this is 2024 and everything has a massive iPad in the middle. This here is no exception. We're looking at a 12.8-inch display, but at long last, automakers are finally seeing the light, or rather the absence of, because this display is an OLED screen. OLED screens are something that we've been waiting for a long time in cars. Instead of using normal screen backlighting, which makes even the black pixels emit light, this only illuminates what it needs. That means that when you're driving at night, black pixels are actually black. This significantly reduces unnecessary light pollution in the cabin and just makes it a much nicer, cleaner experience all around. You don't have a bright black edge inside a dark black bezel. The whole thing just matches. You've got very steady gradients. It's really nicely executed. Also pretty nicely executed is the MBUX system that runs inside of it. It's not perfect, and to be honest, I find its glossy design a little bit tacky. But it presents a beautiful navigation system at its core and default screens. This is something that in the longer run you're gonna have to be paying to maintain, as you will have to be paying subscription for things like remote start, which is controlled from your phone if you so desire. That being said, if you're spending $155K base on an S-Class, that's probably not the end of the world for you. That infotainment display too, it must be said, is really beautiful. Running through city centers, it introduces nice 3D effects, which are actually proportionate to the buildings you see around you. It helps you place where you are. When I head north to see my family, I get to see all of the beautiful lakes displayed with the moon reflecting off of them. Oh, the thought, the detail. With that being said, there's a lot that's a little bit inconvenient to find. There is a learning curve to MBUX, and even once you know its quirks and its ways, it can still be a little bit of a hassle to actually find what it is that you want. I've found myself using far more voice control than I would actually like to use here in the S-Class, and while it works relatively well, it's not always perfect. Basic functions like seat massagers and even color changes do work quite well, but you've still got a very dated sounding AI voice. And really, I'd rather just not have to talk to the robot. All basic functions should be within 2 taps of a start into the screens. Also a little disappointing at the fingers are some of the controls in here. These control stalks are the same as you'll find in any other Mercedes product, and honestly, the millimeter of wobble back and forth here in this left stalk is not the end of the world, but it's not what I expect of an S-Class. Something else I don't expect of an S-Class is quite so much engine noise. This 3-liter straight 6 is fine. It's not noisy, but it is kind of noisy for what you'd expect of an S. When I picked this car up, the battery was totally drained. My first experience with it was the engine firing up, and I was pretty underwhelmed in those first moments. It just sort of buzzes along at a depth and frequency that's honestly kind of similar to just a GMC 6.2-liter pickup truck. It's not intrusive, I don't mind it, but it's a little unbecoming, especially for the prestige of this model line. And really then, this underscores what this new generation S-Class is really meant to be about. This is a car that you are supposed to get in the 580e trim. You're supposed to plug this in at night and use it as a plug-in hybrid to make the most of your available electric range. And driven electrically, it's wonderful. When I left it in for a day and a half to fully charge at home, it did a really nice job. It's graceful, it's smooth. As an electric too, it promises some pretty solid numbers. Mercedes-Benz touts a 90-kilometer full electric range here in the S-Class, and that would be good and well if you actually got that. Now, I should be saying that this week it has been around -7 degrees. Those are not ideal EV temperatures, but many EVs with heat pumps still do all right in such conditions. Driven around in these temperatures and the way I have been, I would charitably allow for 20, maybe even 25% deviation from claimed. This thing, however, has really only been running me about half what it claims. That's really disheartening, especially when it takes so long to charge. Mercedes-Benz says that this S580e should be able to charge from 10% to 80% charge off, and I quote, an ordinary AC outlet in 2.25 hours. That is something that I simply have not seen anything close to in my week with this car. I have tried plugging the included charger into many different outlets in many different places, all ordinary AC outlets, and I've yet to see a charge rate above 2 kilowatts. That means that plugged in for 12 or 15 hours overnight, you'll get half a charge, but that's not going to get you your 90-kilometer range from Oro down to the city. And of course, that's even before the question of whether the 90 kilometers are real. Now, if you want to spend a little more money, Mercedes-Benz will let you charge this thing faster at up to 60 kilowatts from a DC fast charger. That will cost you $650, which is actually a worthwhile spend, especially because at a price of $650, we can only assume that that same hardware is already in the car. That price delta is not actually far enough to convince anyone who really knows much about EVs that they're fitting different hardware. These are very clearly built the same way, But like subscriptions, it becomes the question of what of the included equipment they'll actually let you use. So then, taken in sum, we have a very nice car that is very interesting to drive. We have very interesting seating. We have a breadth of available configurations, depending on whether you want to drive this thing up front or be driven and enjoy the back seats. We've also got some weirdness, some slightly offensive subscription features, and a slightly disappointing gasoline powertrain. I'm really not thrilled about the buzziness of this engine, especially knowing what 120k will get you from the BMW 7 Series. That thing is so much quieter, and okay, sure, this thing offers you 60 watts more standard audio output, but I think the 7 Series is a more interesting product. I've complained before about Mercedes-Benz getting complacent and knowing that its clientele will just spend money, and this does ultimately seem a certain flavor of that. In fairness, 155k base or 176 as we've got tested here is not actually crazy money for this segment in this era, but it doesn't exactly feel like a deal in the way that the BMW surprisingly does. With that then, were I buying an S-Class, I would absolutely get the 580e plug-in hybrid. That electric powertrain is the way you want this. But were it my money, I'd be looking at the BMW 7 or i7, which is the same price if you really want German, or better still, the Genesis G90. That thing is phenomenal and offers so very much from basically the same price point. Mercedes may be able to rest on its laurels, but Genesis knows that it has to earn its keep, and it really is these days. You can find that full video and written review on Driving.ca, and while you're at it, check out our website and the rest of our social media for more luxury car news, reviews, previews, specs, and all the rest. For Driving.ca, I'm El Alder. Have a wonderful day, guys.